The Banshees of Inisherin is a 2022 film written and directed by Martin McDonagh and looks at issues such as despair, depression, guilt and legacy. The story conveys the ending of a friendship between two men on an island off the coast of the then called Irish Free State in 1923. The film is weirdly allegorical, and the microcosm of Inisherin perfectly reflects issues relating to the history of Ireland.
Good luck to you. Whatever it is you're fighting about.
To understand Banshees, you might need to know about Ireland's much complicated history. Civil war raged in the country from June 1922 until May 1923. It was post-Irish War of Independence with the British Army, and war was waged over the Anglo-Irish Treaty, which created the Irish Free State, which divided the country. Cannon and rifle fire can be heard across the water. Inisherin, an island, is safe for now, and its people are left to ponder from its picturesque existence who is fighting who and what for. This parallels perfectly with Colm and Podrick, two people once friends, and one side all of a sudden no longer wanting anything to do with the other. A senseless war, with brothers fighting brothers, neighbours fighting neighbours, and it all leading to more spite, more loneliness, and a continuation of utter meaninglessness. Colm's reasoning is simple. Podrick is dull, and cutting out the dull in his life means he's free to flourish. Podrick cries, not just because of the loss of someone he considered his closest friend, but at the rawness of it. The almost senseless reasoning. He didn't do anything wrong. Colm just decided after many years that he wanted to go another direction. Colm says he wants a bit of peace in his heart. It's like saying you want the war to end, but on your terms. But your terms are hard to meet, and war wages on. The Civil War was something that sprung up overnight for Irish residents. Like the country woke up and one half hated the other for no great reason, other than allegiances. The Free State versus the IRA lads.
Or is it the other way around?
Colm draws a boundary, of course, and Podrick is the character violating that boundary repeatedly with horrific consequences. The decision is sudden and sad, and there are many moments in the film that reflect just that. The Civil War and Colm and Podrick's relationship are the two glaring examples. Likewise, Siobhan deciding to leave Inisherin is both sudden and sad. Podrick's donkey eating severed fingers and choking is also sudden and sad. It all relates to the Civil War, which happened so abruptly. We all feel like life could flow so swimmingly, but however perfect our circumstances, we just find new ways to burn it all down. Inisherin isn't even a real place. There are islands off the coast of Ireland, but Inisherin is a creation. Inis is an Irish word for island, and Éireann the genitive form of Éire, which means island. So, Ireland's island. While the Civil War was very much real, Inisherin is introduced almost fantastically through the clouds and shone on brightly by a colourful rainbow. Religious figures and symbols are seen almost everywhere, but that part is no fantasy. Animals living in houses, though, is a little Disney. Beyond its two leads there is the Fool and his stick. Dominic is a tragic character, a charming but mostly witless boy, though sometimes shows signs of having a unique perspective. An unwanted romantic that suffers abuse from his violent father. If we go tarot, then the Fool indicates new beginnings. Colm sets his sights on new beginnings, and Podrick is no part of it. Unfortunately for Dominic, his new beginning is also his end. A running theme during the film is despair, and it's despair that kills poor Dominic, whose painful existence tragically leads him to suicide. The most fantastical character in the film is the Banshee of Inisherin herself, Mrs. McCormack, who, like the Banshees of legend, foreshadowed death. McCormack, an eerie presence, watches over Inisherin like a creepy wise owl. Podrick and his sister talk about hiding from her. McCormick foreshadows a death on Inisherin.
Maybe even 2 deaths.
Well, that'd be sad.
In the end, it is only the one death. Colm talks about his song, called The Banshees of Inisherin, to Podrick. He says he thought about playing it at his funeral. Of course, it's bold of Colm to think he would outlive Podrick, but Colm lives on a fantastical island and has fantastical ideas. He may have trouble accepting his reality.
And how's the despair?
To understand Colm's reasoning for wanting to cut Podrick off, you have to understand Colm. The fact that the priest asks him about his despair implies he's talked about it with him before, and his plan to cure it was to cut out Podrick from his life. Colm smokes, which could be a result of anxiety, or at this stage a simple dependence. His reasoning is simple enough.
I just don't like you no more.
Podrick is dull. Colm is discontent and feels time is slipping away from him. Life on Inisherin is pretty simple. It's insular, sure, and everyone knows everyone, but people are kind to one another. It's a relaxed life by the ocean, and the landscape is gorgeous. But like the saying goes, the grass is always greener. Colm is concerned about his legacy. He's in the latter stages of life and feels like he made no mark upon existence. He clearly judges himself as much as he judges others. He feels he has no legacy to be proud of.
Do worry sometimes that I'm just entertaining myself while I stave off the inevitable.
No wife, no kids, and only a dog for companionship, of which he will likely outlive. He admires musicians, painters, and poets, but is envious of what they left behind. He tries to start over, column point 2, and this time it just won't have Podrick slowing him down with meaningless conversation. But Colm is no savant. He plays fiddle in a rinky-dink pub. He talks about Mozart, though actually gets his era wrong. So keen on starting over without Podrick is that Colm threatens to cut off his fingers to ensure it happens. But with his fingers gone, Colm can't even play the fiddle anymore. He would rather chop off his own fingers and never play again, rather than accept that he won't be remembered for anything other than being some man with a dog on Inisherin, or perhaps now he'd be remembered for being the man with 5 fingers missing. Which leads me to believe that it was never really about Colm point 2 at all. This whole thing has to do with his guilt. Colm woke up and decided his neighbour wasn't his neighbour anymore. He wanted things to be one way and hear nothing of it. The guilt is replicated across the water, with the factions of Irishmen killing each other. They both have something that needs to happen, and they try to shirk any responsibility about feeling guilty over it. But they are guilty. Telling someone that you no longer want to be friends because they're dull is a brutal thing to do. Brutal, honest, and blunt. Podrick goes through a whole caveat of emotions, eventually ending on anger, telling Colm that he is going to set fire to his house. Such is the lunacy of one side's antics that it'll make your nice neighbour vengeful. Many homes were burned during the Irish Civil War. The difference between Colm and Podrick here, though, is that unlike Colm's blunt action by cutting him off, Podrick gave him fair warning.
Do you think God gives a damn about miniature donkeys, Colm?
Colm sure does, and this is where the thoughtful among us flourish. Unsurprisingly, we think of ourselves as the most important species on this planet, despite there being 8.7 million different species. There's a heaven for people, but not for any other breathing being. Podrick was different. He loved his donkey Jenny and invited her into his home. Colm has a realization here, in that he fears God doesn't give a damn about donkeys, and that is the problem. He fears we put human needs above all else, and ultimately all we end up with is conflict and despair. We may cherish those similar to us, but alienate everyone else. Perhaps this whole thing was about these men needing to be free. Colm didn't want to feel guilty about his own legacy or look inward towards his depression, and with his house burned down and now being physically unable to play the fiddle to make any decent music, he's free of it all. But it's Podrick who is forever changed. He loses his sister across the water, and he loses his miniature donkey, a creature he loved and cherished.
Haven't had any rifle fire from the mainland in a day or two. I think they're coming to the end of it.
This should signal the end of Podrick and Colm's feud, but Podrick cannot go back. Some things there's no moving on from, he says, and maybe that's a good thing. There's a deep and painful acceptance on Podrick's face when Colm throws him a much appreciated thank you, as if his character is finally justified after being so horrendously torn down. The Banshee watches on. More deaths will come. Civil war or no civil war, boundaries have been created, and the unrest will continue. Thank you.
The events of Bloody Sunday would come to define the conflict for
the
many
IRA,
and
hostility
leave a
from the
lasting
Catholic
legacy of
community
bitterness
to
towards justice.
There was
This
intense
was
consultation
severely
from the
British
British
across the
After
less than
but on
30
most
minutes
occasions,
of
the
shooting,
was worked out.
The British
That's the
Army
thing alone
Northern
that we
Ireland
see as the
and
most
different one of
significant
those
illustration
in their efforts to
of how
defeat the
far
IRA.
Ulster has gone towards the precipice which so many have forecast is awaiting it.
How's the despair?
It's back a bit.